Welcome to the Front 7 Podcast right here on YouTube. I am your host, Money Mike, and we are just 2 days away from celebrating the new year. And I know what you're thinking. It's March. We celebrated the new year back in January. No, I'm talking about the new year that every football fan looks forward to, because that means it is the official start and preparation for the 2016 NFL season. I am talking free agency. The new league year opens Wednesday, and the gates will open up, and the teams will be spending the money to bring in the big players to try to help their team ahead of the draft so they can focus on another need in the first round of the draft. And they're looking for that guy that can come in and be a difference maker for them within free agency. And if you're looking at the quarterback market, it's pretty much slim. If you're a team that needs a quarterback, like the Cleveland Browns every year, you are not going to have any luck on the free agency market. Unless, of course, Brock Osweiler is available and he hits the market and he turns down the Broncos' 3-year, over $45 million deal. And then you have a chance at a young, up-and-coming quarterback in Brock Osweiler. But, considering the fact that it is today, being Monday, that Peyton Manning has officially retired from the NFL, chances are the Broncos are going to get something done with Brock Osweiler before he hits the free agency market on Wednesday. It would be something if Brock Osweiler did wait and he saw what other teams were offering and took more money elsewhere from a team like Houston or maybe Cleveland that would be willing to pony up the money, leaving Denver without a quarterback with Peyton Manning retiring today. I want to go ahead and preview free agency, and I'm going to see what players are out there for your team to improve upon for the 2016 season. And we've already seen some cap casualties add players to the free agency market, and I will get to that in a little bit. But first, we're going to start on the offense. The quarterback market, as I said, is really slim pickings. The Redskins took Kirk Cousins off the market with the franchise tag. The Philadelphia Eagles re-signed Sam Bradford to a 2-year, $36 million contract, in which they were pretty much the top two out there, or one of the top three, or two of the top three. I can't even talk today. Two of the top three available, with Brock Osweiler still slated to hit the open market on Wednesday. And as I said, Houston, Cleveland, I expect them two to be in the running and challenge Denver from a cap and money standpoint and compete for Brock Osweiler's services on Wednesday and up until he gets signed by whoever. The Broncos elected to use the franchise tag on Von Miller. Peyton Manning, as I said, is retiring today. And if the Broncos lose Brock Osweiler to the Texans or to the Browns, or maybe another team out there that needs a quarterback, the Jets, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's a free agent. The Jets don't really have the cap, so maybe they would just re-sign Ryan Fitzpatrick to a cheap deal. But besides Cleveland and Houston, which are rumored to be chasing Brock Osweiler when he hits the open market, you look at the other teams that need a quarterback. And I look at it from a standpoint, Cleveland has the most salary cap. Jacksonville does, but Cleveland is right up there with teams that have a lot of cap to spend. So Cleveland would be able to do what they usually do, and they overpay free agents. And considering they have been needing a quarterback since 1999, they will probably be willing to overpay Osweiler for his services. And if I'm Brock Osweiler, I would wait on Cleveland to see how much more money they would be offering before accepting Denver's deal. But of course, if Brock Osweiler wants to just win Super Bowls, well, the Denver defense is in place. Von Miller is in place. Wade Phillips, they didn't get a head coaching offer. I mean, their defense is going to be solid for the next couple years. So, if Brock wants to win a Super Bowl, he would accept a 3-year, $45 million deal that Denver offered him. Now, besides Cleveland and Houston, as I alluded to, the Jets don't have the cap, even though it would be a good fit, but they just don't have the cap. So the Jets are going to have to look at re-signing Ryan Fitzpatrick and possibly either developing Bryce Petty or going into the draft and taking a quarterback that can compete with Bryce Petty in the future. And basically, the Los Angeles Rams and the 49ers are the only two teams left that I see chasing Brock Osweiler in free agency. The Rams need a new quarterback. They're desperate. They were so desperate that before Peyton Manning was going to announce his retirement later on today, that there was reports that they were going to go after Peyton Manning and that they were going to try to bring Peyton Manning to Los Angeles to be their quarterback. And it just would not have worked out. Peyton Manning is making the right decision on that. And yes, it's a passing league. Quarterbacks are more important than ever. But we still got running backs out there. Teams still use running backs. I know. It's shocking. In this quarterback-driven league, yes, it's shocking. Teams still use running backs. But if you're looking for one in free agency, in case if you don't think that you can get Ezekiel Elliott in the first round, Doug Martin is out there. Lamar Miller is out there for you. And unfortunately, C.J. Anderson, he's a restricted free agent, so the Broncos get to keep him. And Gary Kubiak gets to, again, mold him. And again, make him into Justin Forsett. Because we saw Justin Forsett had that great year in Baltimore with Gary Kubiak as the offensive coordinator. And you saw the same thing here last year with C.J. Anderson showing some flashes of brilliance. Under Gary Kubiak and his scheme. The Texans have moved on from Arian Foster. They released him earlier last week. And I think the Texans are going to be a prime example or a prime spot for Ezekiel Elliott in the draft, if they're looking that way for the first round. Alfred Morris of the Redskins, he will be available. Chris Ivory of the Jets. I mean, some of the running backs here are actually pretty decent, but there are a lot of them that are close to 30. So it's, I don't know, it's a lot of risk and reward with that. But if you need a running back, Doug Martin, Lamar Miller, probably the top two guys out there. If you are a team looking to fill your running back hole on the team before the draft. And so now moving on to the receivers. Back to the combine real quick here. Mike Mayock called it the slowest group of receivers he has ever seen at the combine. And this is coming off of the last couple years where we have had some huge stars come out of the wideout draft class these last couple years. So not a lot of people are projecting receivers to go in the first round anymore. It's more so maybe towards the bottom of the first, maybe in the second round. So you're going to have to look at free agency, in which is still slim pickings. The Bears placed tag on Alshon Jeffrey, so he's out of the market. Marvin Jones of the Bengals, he's out there. Travis Benjamin of the Browns. We saw Alex Mack opt out. He alluded to some stuff on Twitter about he's just maybe tired of all the constant changes, so now he's going to seek out maybe a team that's going to win. Travis Benjamin, there was reports saying that they were close to a new deal, but nothing has happened. Now he's going to hit the open market, and he showed some flashes of brilliance with Johnny Manziel as a starting quarterback. I think he would be somebody to look out for as a really surprise underdog type of deal that nobody would expect. Ruben Randall of the Giants, Anquan Bolden, he'll be 36, but it sounds like he is willing to go to a team that's a contender to try to win another Super Bowl. Rashard Matthews of the Dolphins, and you got some pretty decent, like maybe number 2 guys, but besides Alshon Jeffrey, there really isn't really any receiver that would be a game changer out there in free agency for this year. Now moving on to the tight end position. Everybody is looking for the next Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham, and Ladarius Green may very well be that guy. It seems the Chargers are going to look at keeping Antonio Gates, who is 36, or will be 36 in June, over the younger Ladarius Green, who is going to be only 26 this year. If Green hits the market, he is going to be a viable player for some team, but for who, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. He's only 26, and for the Chargers to just let him go if they're going to try to bring back Gates would be a very bad move on their part. The Colts may be losing a couple of tight ends themselves. Coby Fleener and Dwayne Allen are both hitting the market. We saw earlier in the offseason the Colts were locking up players left and right, trying to get people under contract. But Coby Fleener and Dwayne Allen has still yet to be signed as of the recording of this show. So, what's going to happen? I don't know. Will they keep one? Will they keep both? It seems all the signs are pointing to Coby Fleener, which I'm guessing they're doing to help Andrew Luck, to kind of keep the Stanford connection going here, maybe. Even though, personally, I think Dwayne Allen is the better tight end of the two. The Patriots let go of Scott Chandler, who they signed last year in free agency. And besides that, I think there's really not that much on the tight end market either. And now, to end today's offensive preview of free agency, we're going to look at the big guys up front on the offensive line. And judging from the Super Bowl, yes, your offensive line may be able to get you through the decent pass rush that you face throughout the year, and it may even get you through the playoffs. But once you face an elite defense, elite pass rushers, like the Broncos had, the Panthers' offensive line was exposed. Michael Orr, great offensive tackle, but when it mattered most, he could not stop the Broncos' pass rush to keep Cam Newton up. It just did not work. I think the Panthers are going to look at upgrading their offensive line. They got to look at the offensive tackles in the free agency market if they do not want to wait on an offensive tackle at the end of the first round to develop. It's going to be interesting to see what the Panthers plan to do about that to ensure that it doesn't happen again in another Super Bowl in the future. As we know, Cordy Glenn was hit with the franchise tag by the Buffalo Bills, so he is off the market. Now, maybe the Panthers like Michael Orr, so maybe they can look at right tackle and maybe take in Ryan Schrader from division rival Atlanta Falcons and put him at right tackle and try to improve their offensive line and improve their tackle that way. And then you got Mitchell Schwartz with the same thing, right tackle. He really showed improvement last year once the Browns got rid of Kyle Shanahan. And Schwartz really came alive, and I think he's going to command big money. And while the Browns have the cap, it might be a little bit hard to keep him. And then you have Russell Okung, who, with his injury history, probably, I would say, might end up taking a 1-year prove-it deal in Seattle and see if he can improve his stock for next year's free agency and get a big contract that way. The Raiders have patched their left tackle spot with former Buccaneer tackle Donald Penn. He is going to be 33 next month. Maybe there's a chance, I don't know, maybe Ronnie Stanley could be in a position to where the Raiders could trade up a few spots to get Ronnie Stanley, to maybe put him at left tackle and get a young bookend left tackle there to protect Derek Carr in the long run. And I think that also goes to Tennessee, where Tennessee can throw the entire first round of the draft a loop, because rumors have it they want to trade down for one of the defensive backs, either Jalen Ramsey or Vernon Hargreaves. And as I mentioned, Mitchell Schwartz, Ryan Schrader, you got Andre Smith of the Bengals out there. That could very well fill the need of the right tackle spot. Instead of moving Taylor Lujan over to right tackle and drafting Tunzel, you can get better at right tackle in free agency and potentially look at a DeForest Buckner or a Joey Bosa at the number 1 pick in order to improve your defense, and then come back in round 2, maybe grab yourself a young developmental tackle that can sit behind maybe a Joseph Barksdale. And he was probably one of the lone highlights for the Chargers offensive line last year. So I think he would be able to provide Tennessee a 1 or 2 year stopgap where Tennessee can develop a young right tackle for a couple years. I mean, Andre Smith, he's 29. He's probably going to be looking for a lot of money as he's coming close to being 30 and getting to that age where teams start moving away from the older veteran tackles. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have to decide on what they want to do with Kelvin Beachum. He tore his ACL last year, and considering it was in October that he did it, I would imagine that there's a chance maybe or maybe not he could be ready for the 2016 opener. But with him being a free agent, is he another one that, like Russell Okung, is going to go and take a 1-year deal to stay with the Steelers and prove that he's worth the big money and go from there? So if you need a right tackle, I would say free agency is the best place for you. As I said, the right tackles stick out more than the left tackles do in this draft or in free agency. And I think the left tackles, if you're looking for a left tackle, the draft is your best option there. Now let's move to the inside here, where I really expect the Dolphins to be a really key player when it comes to the guards, along with the Saints, along with the Colts. I expect some of these teams that have issues on their interior to really look at the guards and centers in free agency to bolster their offensive line. the top name out there, depending on whether he plays guard or tackle, to me is Kelechi Osemele of the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens envision him as their left tackle of the future. They have made, quote unquote, according to John Harbaugh and Ozzie Newsome, a aggressive offer. Now, what that definition of an aggressive offer is, who knows? We know he's going to be looking at maybe $10 million a year. And if the Ravens are able to keep him, and now considering the fact that the Ravens have let go of Darryl Smith, they let go of Chris Canty, they've restructured Joe Flacco's contract, all in an effort to try to keep Kelechi, I think we could very well see Kelechi stay in Baltimore. Because I think what I see is, while he may want to be paid as the highest guard, the left tackle money is so much more. And if Baltimore wants him at left tackle, that's where the money is. And I think when you're Baltimore, you have to look at the other contenders that may also see him as a left tackle going forward in the future. Miami might be one of them, even though they may want him at guard because they got Brandon Albert. When you look at maybe Cleveland, we saw Cleveland last year, trade deadline, they were close to trading Joe Thomas to the Denver Broncos, which, ironically, man, doesn't that have to suck if you're Joe Thomas? You were almost traded mid-season to the team that won the Super Bowl. Instead, you stayed on a team that ended up being the second worst team in the league, and you could have been traded to the team that won the Super Bowl. He could have had a Super Bowl ring. But the Broncos did not want to give up a second first-round pick like the Browns were asking for. So maybe their asking price becomes a little bit more reasonable. And they look at maybe Kelechi as a future left tackle that can replace Joe Thomas going forward. And we know players, they love to go and take money from a team that's in the same division as their old team to get back at them. Evan Mathis, I don't know. Are the Broncos going to go young now that Peyton Manning has retired? His age is concerning. He's 35 in November. But he should be good enough to provide at least a 1 or 2 year stopgap before he ultimately retires from the NFL for some team that needs a guard. I never understood why Chip Kelly got rid of him in the first place, but Chip Kelly just does Chip Kelly things. Alex Boone, speaking of Chip Kelly, Alex Boone has a chance to leave San Francisco and get out of the mess potentially could come of Chip Kelly and Trent Balik working together. So Alex Boone has a chance to go play for a winner while the 49ers get destroyed by Chip Kelly and Trent Balik. They should have never let Jim Harbaugh walk. Literally, Jed York, you're an idiot for that. So Alex Boone will probably get the hell out of San Francisco. Jeff Allen is another guy in Kansas City. We don't know if Kansas City is going to try to keep him. We saw that Andy Reid didn't really play him. He was, behind on the depth chart. They're going to look at it as they can just replace him in the draft while Jeff Allen can go and get a deal for somebody else. And maybe if the Ravens can't re-sign Kelechi, maybe Jeff Allen or even a Richie Incognito can come into Baltimore for a couple years and be a stopgap while the Ravens can maybe focus on Ronnie Stanley or another left tackle of the future that they can groom going forward with a stopgap at left guard. And I tell you, Richie Incognito is going to be one person that I think would command a lot of money. Or at least he should in my book. Because he proved that being blackballed for a year was all 32 teams making a huge mistake and a misjudgment on their part and judging him off of that bully scandal that happened in Miami, in which Joe Philbin is the offensive line coach in Indianapolis. Good Lord. Somebody get Andrew Luck out of Indianapolis, please. A lot of stopgaps at guard out there. You got Jeff Shorts, you got Zane Beatles, Manuel Ramirez, Chris Chester. So you got some guys in here that are just kind of stopgaps, which pretty much, if you don't have an all-pro guard, that's pretty much what you're looking at. Maybe that, or if you want to get a rookie, who knows. But that's it for the guards. Now let's conclude this with the centers. And as we know, Alex Mack opted out of his contract out of Cleveland. Now there's reports out there, there's reports out there that say he could come back to Cleveland under a new contract. I don't think so. I think when you look at it, Alex Mack and Joe Thomas, both of them have been there long enough to see how unstable the team is. They haven't kept a coach for more than 2 years, ever since they fired Romeo Crennel. Every coach that they have hired since have been 1 year or 2 years and then let go. And then rinse and repeat with a new coach. So I think, while Hugh Jackson, I think, is going to do his best to talk to both, to try to maybe get them to change their mind. And I really like Hugh Jackson being in Cleveland. I think it's a good hire as long as they give him enough time to win. And as long as he's not canned after like 1 or 2 seasons. But for Alex Mack, I think he's going to look at a team with stability. He might actually take less money to go to a team that is contending for the playoffs. And that is a playoff team. Atlanta, they were 5-0 and they just fell apart last year. And they mentioned, the Falcons have come out and they mentioned center was one of their things they're going to improve upon. So maybe Alex Mack goes to Atlanta. And you have Stefan Wisniewski in Jacksonville, which is interesting because Jacksonville tried to sign Alex Mack to an offer sheet in which Cleveland matched. So maybe Jacksonville tries Alex Mack again, and their plan B is to re-sign Stefan Wisniewski. Ben Jones, another good center out there for the Texans. He was at guard. They moved him to center. It worked out well. But can they keep him in free agency? That is going to be the question there that everybody will be asking. So, essentially, in a way, if you need a right tackle, free agency is the way to go. If you need a left tackle, the draft is the way to go. If you need a stopgap guard, free agency is the way to go. If you're needing a center, I would say center is good as long as you get Alex Mack, Stefan Wisniewski, or Ben Jones. If you cannot get those three, look at the good centers that are in this draft. This year, as an option, we've seen what is done for Dallas. Last couple years, they've used first-round picks on their offensive line, and it's worked out for them well. So they're building the stability of a line that can be together and gel together for 10 plus years. So hopefully teams that need to improve their offensive line take note in free agency and just continue adding some young talent in the draft. So that is going to do it for the offensive preview of free agency. I have reviewed every offensive player that is going to be available, and we'll see what happens and where they go come Wednesday. I will have much more to come on free agency, as later on today I will also post my defensive preview of free agency and preview the players that could very well help you if you need some defensive line help. And not just the draft is loaded with great defensive line players, but free agency as well. If you need a defensive end, you need a defensive tackle, free agency and the draft has got you covered. So if you miss out on a guy in free agency, you have the draft, then you can go and take care of that need, then you can fill in free agency. So, there we go. As of now, Peyton Manning is retired from the NFL. What is going to happen to the Denver Broncos? Do they get Brock Osweiler re-signed before Wednesday? If not, where does that leave Denver at the quarterback position? Does anybody get re-signed before Wednesday? It's going to be very interesting to see what happens leading up to free agency. You've been listening to the Front 7 Podcast. I've been your host, Money Mike. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back with part 2 as I preview free agency on the defensive side.